All right.
Wait one moment. It hasn't started.
Oh.
Yeah, it takes a little. Okay, starting.
Great. All right. Well, good evening, everyone.
Wait one moment. It hasn't
Wait.
started.
Oh, someone's got the live stream in the background. But in any case, good evening, everyone.
Right. All right.
Good evening, Margie, you're not on mute. You're.
Oh, someone.
Thank you. Hold on.
Someone's got the.
That's me. Hang on.
The live.
Great. Okay. We're not going to vote on any of the three bills that are on the agenda, but I'd like to review for House Bill 307 the amendments that the bill sponsor Delegate Lehrman has put together, and see what questions we might have. I do want to ask Tyler Abbott because he has, so I know he has a suggestion for another amendment that I thought we should hear about. We'll just have conversation about the amendments, see where we are with it in terms of questions. And then the other two bills that are on the list, which kind of have disappeared into my desk. But by the time Kristen, what are the other two bill numbers? HB 595 and 621.
There you go.
Yeah. Okay.
I wasn't clicking.
All right.
The draw.
So let's plan to be done by 8. I think, even if we're not finished by 8, let's plan to wrap up then. And any questions before we get going? Okay. All right. So Kristen, could I ask you to review the amendments to the Delegate Lehrman's EPR bill?
Yeah, I'm just turning up my audio. So I guess what I'll do is I'll just go over briefly what the bill does, the intent of the bill, and then go over the amendments. And then I know there might be further tweaks to the amendments that MDE may have, and then Tyler could speak on that. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay. So I sent out a copy of the reprint, so hopefully everybody has that. So what the bill first does is that it requires MDE to conduct a statewide recycling needs assessment. And then the bulk of the bill is establishing an extended producer system in the state for packaging materials. Producers of packaging must submit producer responsibility plans to MDE. And then there's a number of items that must be included in the plan that includes items like identifying information and performance goals. The plan must also describe the financing method that will be used by the responsible producer to implement the plan. The financing method must provide a method for investing in recycling infrastructure. It must provide for the reimbursement rate, and it must establish a fee structure for participating producers that's set in an amount to cover implementation and administrative costs. So a lot of the components of the program are going to show up in these plans. And then the plans, the financial bid would be evaluated by an MDE designated independent financial auditor. And then there's also an advisory council that's comprised of a variety of stakeholders, and they would be providing input on the plan. And so as far as the amendments, I have them chunked out into about 4 amendments. I mean, it's more than 4, but however Delegate Stein would like us to do this, I could describe each amendment, or I could go through all 4, or if you wanted to stop, just so you know, they're chunked in about 4 different areas of the bill. Okay, so
why don't we, Kristen, Delegate Ruth has a question, so why don't we take any questions we might have now and then proceed maybe one amendment group at a time. If that's okay. Delegate Ruth?
I just wanted to ask Kristen if you could share screen when we go through the amendments. That's helpful to me. Or is that too difficult? I'm sorry. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry. Forget.
No, I'm not sure. Let me see if I have share screen abilities. I think I do. I have a paper copy, so hold, give me 1 second. So I have.
That's all right. Don't worry about it. I'm sorry.
No, I actually think I understand the visuals. So as far as amendments, I'm thinking maybe the reprint I should bring up. So that way everybody can sees it into just
Yeah, that makes sense.
I should have had this up. All right. So that's up now. So let's see what we can do. What am I doing wrong? When you share, when you open up your file,
It should ask you to pick a screen.
right. And the screen, oh, you know what? Apparently I have a lot of windows open. Ah, that would be why. There we go. I had so many windows open, I had to scroll down. So is it showing up? Okay, great.
It's the bill. You want the bill or the amendments, Kristen?
So this is going to be the reprint copy, and I think it might be a little easier to go through it by seeing the actual text of the bill. So this portion of the bill relates to the requirement that MDE conduct a statewide recycling needs assessment. That's just right there. That's a little clean, just to clean up. Make it to. So the bill as introduced required that a recycling needs assessment be conducted once every 10 years. And so what this amendment language does, it indicates that the assessment must be conducted at least once every 10 years, or as recommended by the advisory council that's established under this bill. There are instances in the bill where composting, the references to composting are being updated to organics recycling. And organics recycling includes composting and anaerobic digestion. This is still the, so that's the first part of the bill where MDE would first conduct the needs assessment. And then we get into the substance of the bill that's establishing.
Kristen,
Yes?
I'm sorry, could I ask you? So what's, I noticed a lot's been taken out.
Oh, sure. So, okay, this portion of the bill, I'm thinking maybe we don't get into talking about because I think MDE is going to want some of this to come back in. Essentially, as introduced, it was indicating or directing any fees that were collected by producer responsibility organizations would be deposited into the state recycling trust fund. So that's where we received amendments to take that out because the producer responsibility organizations, I think, were trying to say, oh, we'd like to hold on to the money and just have an audit. But there's some implementation costs or, plan review costs. I think MDE would need to have a dedicated funding source, and they would like that money to come in. And I think what, Tyler can talk about this more, but I think they're going to try to maybe propose like a breakout account in the state recycling trust fund to receive money from, we'll call them the pros, the producer responsibility organizations, so that it covers the costs of implementing the program.
Right. Okay.
So, sorry. So that's what all the text you see being taken out. I think that's still something that might be further tweaked. So we have a bunch of defined terms in the bill as introduced, and what the amendment does, it alters and adds definitions. A definition was added for local government to make it clear that both counties and municipalities can request reimbursement for the costs of managing the recyclables. There's exemptions or exclusions for packaging materials. And so this would involve pesticide products and certain drug and medical products, including those that are intended for animals. They would not be covered as packaging materials under this bill. And should I go? I don't know if I'm just like kind of scrolling too quick. I don't know if this is maybe doing this very clearly.
How about if any subcommittee member has a question, just, as we're
Just
going
stop
through
me.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, just jump in. Yeah.
Just
Okay.
stop me.
Okay,
Yeah.
Kristen, one second. So page 7, we added county municipality, and then where it says packaging materials include, anything struck. So this prescription and pharmaceutical packaging has been struck.
So initially, that type of packaging would have been included in the bill. Now the language isn't identical, but what the exemption is getting at is that drug and pharmaceutical types of packaging actually would be excluded with this
Oh yeah, I
amendment.
see it here. The federally approved drug, medical device, or biological diagnostic.
And there was two
Yeah.
different kinds of amendments, those coming from human health interests and those from animal health. And so we just had to blend them together. So we have this kind of catch-all, including items intended for animals. So that's, supposed to kind of get the whole, uh-oh. What happened there? Are you guys seeing? Okay, I must have hit something funny. Okay. So the bill as introduced included a definition for producer. And what this amendment does is it just puts a simplified definition of producer, because what a producer is further fleshed out later in the bill. So we'll get to what is a producer under this bill in a page or two. There is an exclusion. There were exclusions in the bill as introduced that a producer would not include a local government or a nonprofit. Language is added to also exclude an entity that manufactures a drug or device authorized for sale by U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Again, just another update here. You'll see composting in most instances would be update where it's appropriate. It's being updated to include organics recycling, so it captures both composting and anaerobic digestion. Okay, under section 92403, we have new language coming in under line 15. And this is where it's fleshed out what is a producer. So the first paragraph applies to items sold in packaging materials at a physical retail location in the state. And so it goes to 3 kinds of scenarios of what would constitute the producer. And then there's also a paragraph 2, that applies to items sold or distributed in packaging in the state through remote sale. So when we get into this portion, they're going to have the producer of packaging who is of the packaging materials that are used to directly protect or contain the item. That's one responsible party, and they're fleshed out. I keep pointing and you cannot see me pointing, I'm so sorry. And then there's also the packaging material that's used to ship these items. There's also going to be a responsibility component to that type of packaging.
So if it's branded, then it's whoever the brand is
Correct.
responsible. If it's not branded, it's the manufacturer. Am I understanding that right?
So if it's it's branded, if it's the manufacturer's own brand,
Right.
then the person that manufactures the item is the producer.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
And then you get if it's manufactured by someone other than the brand owner, the producer is the brand. So it depends.
That makes sense.
So just as maybe as an example, so if let's see, I order something from Macy's and it's sent by Macy's in their packaging, Macy's would be responsible. But if there is a sort of a local retailer that I ordered online and they ship it, then the retailer is the retailer is responsible?
I'll do my best to answer it. And then certainly if you think there's anybody else in the room that can answer how they think this works, that could be helpful. But
Okay.
my understanding is if you have a retail location and you're selling an item, in its packaging, that package that contains, I don't know, the Barbie doll or whatever, like there's producer responsibility for that packaging. Now, if somebody ships that, from like an Amazon or whatever, the brand owner is still responsible for that initial packaging. And then the packaging that's being used to ship that item, person shipping that item would have responsibility. So there's different, I guess, responsible, folks involved, just depending on how many, I guess, I don't know what the right word is, but how many types of packaging are involved in this transaction. You have packaging to contain an item, you have packaging to ship an item.
Right. Okay.
So I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
So I don't want to get hung up on this too much. I'm sorry. But so like there's a store, I think it's Aldi that sells, it's like they're actually manufactured by big name brands, I think, but they don't have the brand names on it. They just say Aldi, and that's how they keep the prices down. I believe that's how it works. So in that case, it would be Aldi that would be, if it's the Aldi name on it, that would be the.
And
I wouldn't know to that level. I mean, there's going to be a producer.
Okay, that's all right. I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm getting way into the weeds. I'm sorry.
And I think it's hard because I think it's easy to get into the weeds. And so, I hope this is clear. So if you're looking at paragraph 2, and this would be applied to the items that are sold or distributed in packaging materials in the state through remote sale or distribution. The first item here says the producer of the packaging material used to directly protect or contain the item is the same as the producer that we've established up here. And that's where you get these different layers of responsibility. And then the next item, the producer of the packaging materials used to ship the item to a consumer is the person that packages and ships the item to the consumer.
Right.
So, this is taken from other bills and try to, kind of work within, Maryland style. I think this was the intent, but I know there's been some maybe just tailoring the language.
Yeah,
so I'm hoping that it's effectuating the intent and how I'm reading it.
Good voice.
Yeah, the way I think I'm seeing this is that I think of places like distributors like Procter and Gamble. Now they Tide makes Tide, but Procter and Gamble has their like logo on it and they ship it. So I think the way that goes. So what I'm hearing is that Tide and Procter and Gamble would be responsible for a fee, or Procter and Gamble is responsible for the fee because they actually create the packaging. And then let's say and they also box it and send it out to whatever. They would be responsible for the fee, not necessarily Tide, who made the product, because Procter and Gamble actually packages and ships, or maybe.
Yeah, Delegate Ruth, but also in a second, I'm going to ask Sydney Harris, who's on the call, to try to clarify. Is that what you're going to say, Delegate Ruth?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Sydney, can you provide clarification on this?
Sure. Hi. Sorry about spamming your chat there. I was just trying to help.
Sure.
I think that the easiest way to think about the definition of the producer is that it's designed to capture, almost every single instance the brand owner of the thing that's inside the packaging. So if I buy like chapstick is responsible for the like plastic tube that it comes in. Procter and Gamble is a great example because that they own a lot of different brands. And so they would be responsible for whatever packaging Tide comes in if they own that brand, or Dove comes in for like deodorant if they own that brand. Anything that they put on the market under their own brand or any brand that they own, they're responsible. But where the shipping stuff comes in is mostly in like secondary or tertiary packaging, which is like, think of like the Amazon smiley face bubble envelope mailer, or like a big box, or a bunch of foam peanuts that, you know, some online retailer distributes, you know, other branded stuff in their own packaging. The thought process there, to just break it down, is like, whatever packaging you choose, you should be responsible for. So if Amazon is over packaging my chapstick, well, that's not really the fault of chapstick. So Amazon should pay for that packaging. Chapstick still pays for the little plastic tube, but if Amazon wants to put that plastic tube in like 16 boxes, then they're going to pay for those boxes. I think that hopefully gets at the question. I think that's like the easiest way to think about breaking it down.
Thank you. That was great.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you. Why don't we move on, Kristen?
Sorry, I'm writing a note. Yeah, that was good, helpful. There were exemptions included in the bill. So what this next amendment does is it alters the exemptions. So it increases the amount, you know, that would be covered for, or a person that generates less than a certain amount would be exempt. So it increased that from 1 million in gross revenue to $5 million for the immediately preceding calendar year. There's language here to exempt a person that owns or operates a restaurant, food cart, or similar establishment that is headquartered in the state and primarily sells to members of the public food that is generally intended to be consumed immediately and without the need for further preparation, either on or off the premises, as long as the person is not a producer of food serviceware. Another exemption is for a person who owns or operates a single retail sales establishment that has no online sales and is not supplied or operated as part of a franchise or a chain. And finally, it also exempts a person that is licensed under the alcoholic beverages article and generated less than 10 million in gross revenue for the immediately preceding calendar year.
So can I ask a restaurant question? And maybe Sydney, this is something you can help with. So how do franchisees come in? You know, the franchise is based in the state. But then yeah, so I guess but then not supplied or operated as part of a franchise or a chain in
So
number two.
that wouldn't be covered under an exemption.
Right. Okay.
Franchise. I mean, unless they, I guess, maybe if they met the any maybe like,
So an independent restaurant then that's not part of a chain then would be the ones who could qualify for the exemption.
that's my understanding.
Okay.
So kind of a quick follow-up. So if you own your own business and you're not a part of a franchise, I don't understand is not a producer of food serviceware. In other words, they don't make their own like napkins. They don't make their own plates or storage materials. Is that what that means? In other words, they purchase that? I don't think I understand this.
I mean, I can only just say what it says. I'm not really sure what's envisioned other than just that they don't produce.
I understand that, but I don't know what.
We don't have a definition for that.
So
Okay.
Sydney is saying it's designed to exempt small family-owned restaurants without letting big chain restaurants, I think fast food chains off the hook.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I think, well, that's not the question. The question is you can be somebody small and still have a large operation. So I guess what I'm asking is this, could you potentially still fit under this category and yet still be a producer of your own food service? Where?
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense, or am
Yeah. Right.
I mean, just a question. We can move on. I don't want to hold up.
No, that's a good question. Why don't we sort of reserve that and see? Well, Dan, I see you're in the interest that you're able to explain about that. Let's put that in the parking lot and come back to it so we can get through more amendments.
So beginning in line 8 gets into the producer responsibility plans. We did receive amendments to alter the dates, but I think that's another one where the sponsor and MDE are working on an alternative language, I think. Maybe have MDE come up with those dates and regulation, but I don't want to speak for MDE. I just know that that was one of the pieces that they were talking about.
See, I think, isn't Tyler on the,
Yeah, I thought, and maybe I'm just postponing too much to the end, but I thought we could ask Tower
Okay.
for
I'm
his
sorry.
amendments sort of after we go through these.
So there's language in the bill that requires a pro to consult with the advisory council that's established under the bill. The amendment language also requires that, we'll see later, the advisory council will be providing written recommendations on these plans in advance of submission. And so this requirement here is for the pro to consider the written recommendations of the advisory council and respond in writing to the advisory council, so that there's just a coordination between the pros and the advisory council. Subsection B, line 3, that's getting into the minimum contents for the plan. And so that's where we have, they have to have certain identifying information, certain goals, performance goals need to be met.
Right, and
We
I
have
guess, wait, Kristen, I'm sorry,
Yep,
could you
yep.
scroll back up? I guess a key, I mean, this is not in the amendments, but they're line 23. A key sort of requirement of the bill is that each participating producer will reduce all packaging material waste by a minimum of 25% for each material type within 5 years. So I guess that's sort of a key benchmark for reducing waste that's in the bill.
And
Yeah, and I'd like to talk to the bill sponsor about this too, because
can't define that.
there might have been a clarification amendment that's not showing up here. So I'll have to check on that, of what that 25% reduction refers to.
Oh, good voice, where you're saying we need.
I was about to ask the same question. I don't, when you say to the extent practical, where is that defined to determine what may be practical and what may not be practical? I mean, I
Kind of a term of art that's used in this type of stuff. It's like, it's this would be a program regulated by MDE, and kind of getting more into those details.
So the plan would get into
Technical
what is,
component. Pardon?
the plan would potentially get into what would be deemed practical or not impractical or.
Yeah, it seems that way. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have language that's adding a few more items to what must be included in the plan. So we're getting there.
And I'm sorry, Kristen, can you go back one page?
Yep. Oh, I went back too far.
It's page 12.
Yeah, no, I was using my arrows and that messed me up. Hold on. The financing method or the perform, okay.
A little bit further down. Producing pack, let's see. Okay, no, I'm fine.
Okay. So starting here in line 6, a pro must describe the process for reimbursement. And so this new language here would also require that the pro include the process for providing reimbursement for multiple brands of packaging materials.
Okay, that, I mean, it's not an amendment, but I guess maybe we can ask this of Dan and Sydney at the end. I just have a question as to how that would work in practice. You know, but the process by which a local government would get reimbursed. But why don't we go on?
Okay, and then talk about that then, because there's going to be different pieces of the bill that will touch on that. So not that it gives any, it sounds like a good idea to wait till the end. Okay.
Okay.
We discussed earlier where the pro would have to respond to written recommendations from the advisory council. They would also have to include those written recommendations in their plan as along with their written response back to the advisory council, and then describe how those written recommendations were considered and addressed in the development of the plan. So again, just trying to have this coordination between the advisory council and the pros in developing these plans. I don't know if I'll just go slow if you want to kind of skim here, or if you want me to go over these items.
Does anyone, as we go through these, if anyone wants Kristen to, you know, focus on any of the amendments, just jump in.
So this is talking about reimbursement rates.
And Kristen, could you go, I'm sorry, just the top of that page that you're on?
No problem. That's all. Just stop me. All good.
Yeah, up to 50% of the cost of collecting packaging materials that are.
Yes, so that's what the reimbursement rate.
For reimbursing local governments. Okay.
Would, yeah. So it. So new language or amendment language on page 15 is altering how the or just adding to how the reimbursement rate would be would need to be established. And so since we added amendment language that excludes certain types of materials, it indicates that this reimbursement rate would be discounted equivalent to the estimated annual volume of packaging materials sold in the state to a person that is exempt from the requirements of this subtitle. So we had all those folks who would be exempt from having to comply with this program. And so the method here would be to take that volume of packing materials, I guess, out of the equation.
And presumably, I guess there's some
they're not responsible, like, so that these pros that have the plans are not going to be responsible for some of this other material that happens to also be around us, was my understanding.
So,
happy for someone to add to the chat.
So it would decrease their tonnage, thereby decreasing the amount that they would have to contribute.
So I think, well, I think it falls on responsibility of what you would be reimbursing for. Like the pros aren't responsible for packaging materials that are going to an exempt entity.
Let me say that again.
So packaging materials, say you have one of those stores that like you sell alcoholic beverages and you make under that whatever the threshold amount is, and you're not covered under this bill. This is saying that for the folks that are covered under the bill, wouldn't be responsible for that shop owner's materials, in the waste stream.
Got it.
It is my understanding, and I'm sure somebody could probably say it with more clarity. I'm going off of what I'm reading, right? And so there's certainly an implementation component to this where I have more expertise and really understanding how this plays out in reality. So just
Okay, so Dan has said that, yeah,
from the words on the
understanding is
paper.
yeah.
This gets into the fees. So producer responsibility organizations, pros, they're going to be setting up a fee structure, amongst the folks that are covered, producers that are covered under their plan. I do think this is an area where Tyler also, MDE might be also working with the sponsor. It all kind of, I'm not sure it so much relates to all of these fees, but I know there's some tweaking that the department is interested in just to make sure that they have, I think, fees up front that they have in their account that will cover the cost of implementing the plan. So I would anticipate this area to also have further tweaks.
Okay.
This is talk about the department's review of the plan.
And is the department's review of the plan, I take it that's a prerequisite before the pros could then charge fees to their members?
Right. So yes, because the way it works, that fee structure is in the plan. And so the plans have to be approved. I mean, I have to look back to see like what the language specifically says. I mean, I'm not sure how this works, but just kind of going off, I think the logic of it all is if that fee structure component is a part of the plan and the plans need to be approved by MDE, I'm thinking time-wise, that's the timeline, how it would work. But I'm not quite sure because now that I'm saying that out loud, maybe there is some sort of upfront fee that may be necessary to collect to get things going. So I think certainly I'll have to go back and just kind of skim the bill again, but then certainly maybe at the end of this, folks who have experience with these types of programs can maybe just further discuss that in a more simplified way.
Okay.
New 92405, line 16 is establishing the producer responsibility plan advisory council that lists a variety of stakeholders that are to be a part of this council, and the amendment language adds representation from the consumer goods sector, the retail and small businesses, and material oriented trade groups. So just to further expand the types of stakeholders that are involved with the council. This is still a representation of the council. So this next page gets into the responsibility of the advisory council. They would be receiving and reviewing these plans, making recommendations to the department. But the amendment language is where, again, we talked about this earlier, where the advisory council would be charged with providing written recommendations regarding the plans, including any update or revision to an approved plan. And this would be before the pro submits the plan to the department. So just ensuring again that that advisory council is involved at the front end of plan development. So begin on line 11, this gets into authorizing, so this authorizes local governments to request reimbursement directly from the pros for their costs associated with managing packaging materials that are in the plan. And the amendment language indicates if there's multiple pros that register approved plans with the department, then those pros must coordinate reimbursement that's requested. And it says they could, if there's multiple producer responsibility organizations, they can establish a third party entity to coordinate on reimbursement. And then this makes it clear, subsection C makes it clear that we're just talking about managing packaging materials, that a local government couldn't request reimbursement from a pro for costs associated with composting materials that are not packaging materials. We have a reporting requirement. And this is the pros are reporting to MDE on progress. Let's see. I know we have a couple more amendments. We're almost there. On line 25, so this is there was a requirement in the bill requiring the department to adopt regulations. This change shall to a may. Again, I think this is one of those items that the sponsor and MDE are talking about. I think MDE might be of the opinion that it should say shall, because so much of this, there's so many parts of this program that these details are going to need to be further fleshed out through regulations. And the final section of the bill relates to penalties, and amendment language is added that would require the department to first issue a warning and provide an opportunity for correction before a penalty could be imposed on a producer for a violation of the bill.
Okay. All right, well, thank you, Kristen. I think what I'd like to do now is circle back to the two issues that we identified going through the amendments. I guess the restaurant question that Delegate Boyce had, and then the local government question that I had. So could I ask Sydney and Dan to jump in and talk about those items? And then we'll go to Tyler to talk about MDE's suggestions.
I think I'm happy if you'd like for me to address, I think it was the food service ware question.
Yes.
Is that correct? So it appears to me, I think I understand what the amendment's trying to get at, but food service ware, depending, it may have come from language in another state, I'm not certain, but there's an issue of food packaging is being covered, and that's clearly outlined earlier in the bill, or maybe it's got a different terminology, foodware or food packaging versus food service ware packaging, which might be the same thing, but I think the intent of that under that, if exemption is the right word, where it says food service ware, is to make sure that if a producer is producing food service ware, they're not exempt from that particular local franchise example. I don't really have a good example of that other than to say, I mean, I'm not aware of a local entity headquartered in Maryland that might be producing their own food service ware versus a large of those franchisees using food service ware, which would be covered packaging.
So I guess I'm confused about what is the difference between food serviceware and food? Well, no, I take that back.
No, it's actually a good question. And I think again, it may have come up from language in another state, but from Ameripen's perspective, food service packaging, if you think of clamshells, takeout containers, bags, those types of things, they are covered packaging. They're already packaging. But in this instance, there's there's up above early in the bill where it talks about, and I'm looking at it says food, I think it's food packaging. So it, in our mind, it's really the same thing. But there's a discussion in some states about food, things like cups, straws, plates, things that aren't packaging, but are they covered or not?
Yeah,
In a
that's
bill.
food serviceware am I correct? Okay,
Correct. It's all in the definition.
got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and also Isaac Meyer was saying that this definition, this item may have come from the Restaurant Association, so he can circle back with the association for clarity. Okay. Now on the issue of local governments, reimbursements, what they're reimbursed for, could someone discuss that from among the advocates?
Can you reference the page again, please?
Let's see.
I'll get you there. Well, so it's one of the things that you're not going to have a lot of the details. So we have reimbursement comes up in two places, but it's mostly going to be in the plan. That's where the pro is coming up with that reimbursement rate. They're coming up with that process. There is a provision here on page 21 that's authorizing local governments to request reimbursement, but then it's more on
Yeah, I found it. It's on page 13, line 6.
Yeah, I'm happy to help try to explain this. Essentially, as Kristen said, a lot of the details, like this formula, isn't going to be in the bill. It will be in the plan. But the idea here is that the bill lays out that the PRO or PROs will be responsible for reimbursing municipalities for a bunch of costs, and it lists those costs, right? Up to 50% of your cost to collect materials, your full cost to transport and process materials. So there's like a bunch of eligible reimbursable expenses that a municipality will have, but how that money is going to be distributed and what, formula there will be to ensure everybody gets reimbursed in the same fair, equitable manner that, might need to incentivize some amount of efficiency. So I might not get my full cost reimbursed if I decide to collect all of my recycling on horseback for fun in my town. You never know what might happen. And so the idea there is there's some standardized objective formula that might have some incentives for efficiency, but then everybody is reimbursed according to that formula. That formula will be in the plan. And so the PRO has to, in the plan, describe, how are you going to tell us your expenses? Here's how we'd like you to report them. Do it quarterly on this online form. All of that would be part of the plan so that they basically have to show MDE that they've thought this all out and they're ready to, respond to reimbursement requests in a standardized way, and that they know what the formula will be, if that makes sense.
So Sydney, is this, it seems like this is a key part of sort of the whole rationale for EPR, that local governments are being reimbursed for the cost of transporting, collecting and processing these materials that are covered under the bill. So, packaging materials that are thrown in the trash that then local jurisdictions have to pick up, their DPWs have to pick this up and landfill it or incinerate it. That's what it's up to 50% of these costs that local government can say to the pros, hey, this is what you're requiring us to do because of your packaging. reimburses for the cost or a portion of the cost. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think you hit on a really key point, which is that the reimbursements are only for recycling costs. So they're not going to be covering like landfill tipping fees or incineration tipping fees or whatever they're called at an incinerator. They're going to be covering the recycling stream, but that also does include disposing of contaminants from the recycling stream.
So this was my question during the hearing / concern when there was I'm thinking about something else. I'm thinking about Delegate Love's bill, but I think it falls into the same category about what can and cannot be recycled. And if I'm a municipality collecting recyclables and I'm collecting stuff that can't be recycled, and I have, let's say half my tonnage of waste is essentially these recyclables, but then when I get there to the kind of recycling facility, let's say 20% of that is actually recycled because the other 80% is either contaminated or items that can't be recycled.
Those costs would be covered. So if people are like, there's kind of two streams of contaminants, right? There's like, I put something in my recycling bin that should be recyclable, but it's really dirty. It's full of like food grease or something.
Sure.
Right? So if the MRF then has to dispose of that because it can't be recycled, that cost to pick it out and dispose of it is included in this program. Then the other stream is like, I just wish cycle something that isn't recyclable at all, but I stick it in the bin anyway. It's going to happen no matter what, even if you have the best education out there. So the cost to get that out of the MRF and dispose of it or do whatever you have to do with it is also covered. It's just that collecting like my bag of trash that's not going to the MRF and is just going directly to, say, a landfill, that piece would not be reimbursed.
Well, that's obvious. I'm just wondering about the other portion.
Yeah, so those costs, this disposal of those, removal and disposal of those contaminants from the MRF would be covered. The idea, though, obviously, is that the PRO is incentivized to reduce that contamination by having a really robust education program and paying municipalities back for their, consistent and robust education programs to try to get that contamination down.
Well, yes, well, that's another conversation another day, but okay, got it.
So Sydney,
Yeah.
So you're saying I'm misreading what packaging materials refer to when it talks about the process for requesting reimbursement for line 8, packaging materials identified in the plan, then line 14, Roman numeral 4, the new one, the process for providing reimbursement for multiple brands of packaging materials. You say that's only meant to apply to recyclables.
Yes, although you may have to ask Dan to jump in on this line because I don't know much about this particular item number 4, process for providing reimbursement for multiple brands. But it would be, if it's under the reimbursement to local governments, which it is, then it's for recyclable.
Why does it say multiple brands of packaging materials then?
I don't know. Dan, do you know?
I honestly don't know either. Sorry.
Okay. Well, that's a key question then, if that could be resolved. Okay, did anyone have any other sort of, question that came up during the review that we want to ask Dan and Sydney before we jump to Tyler? No? Okay, Tyler, you want to join
I'm so
us?
sorry. I just thought of what it might mean. This is a guess, but it might be that if you are not a PRO and you're just registered as an individual brand, and you just for some reason don't want to participate in a PRO, then how are you going to pay back municipalities if they're collecting multiple brands of stuff? So that might be what it's trying to get at, but it would need clarification.
Okay, all right, thank you. Tyler.
Sure. So the starting with the first part that was mentioned by Kristen with how the fees are structured and the funds being deposited into the recycling trust fund. So we have concerns with that language being stricken from the bill because that is where we are able to, establish a set fee that will cover the cost of the program as well as the cost of the needs assessment that now is either at least every 10 years or whenever the board or oversight commission wants to have a new needs assessment. We would be willing to address the concerns of advocates to have a separate, account within the fund. And so that'll be a designated account only towards, that would only have the fees from the PROs as well as, penalties and fines received by the department for noncompliance. The concern was that those funds might be rated in the Maryland Recycling Trust Fund, but putting those into a separate account, just what we did last year with the Clean Water Commerce Act should solve that concern, hopefully.
Okay. Dan has a point, but let's wait. Tower, was there anything else you wanted to discuss?
Sure. So we Kristen also had mentioned establishing the timelines in regulations. So we would like to be able to establish the timelines in regulations because as they are right now, there might be some pretty short timelines that could risk a sales ban before we have the ability to fully approve a plan. Let's say the plan that we receive isn't perfect. We have, I think, up to 6 months to make sure that we work out all the issues. We would request, or, we're hoping to have an extra 6 months there just to ensure that we're not banning a product's use by not being able to, get that plan approved in time, as well as we would like an extra 6 months or a year to finalize that first needs assessment. And so on that needs assessment, we're going to have to, get general funds, procure the needs assessment. We have to procure our contractor. We're then going to have to, get that completed. Then we're going to have to report back on it. So it just is a lot of work to have completed in the timeline. So an extra 6 months to a year would be really helpful to us. And then lastly, we hope to have increased flexibility on the penalty enforcement front. So having the ability to have administrative penalties that would then be deposited into the state recycling trust fund instead of having to have all these listed out as civil penalties would be much appreciated.
Okay. All right. And can you get us your, and maybe you already have, but can you get us actual amendment language?
Oh, of course. Yes.
With the
Right.
specific dates.
Yep. Yeah, we I started working on it as quick as I could when we received the amendments today. So I will certainly get you those amendments as soon as possible.
Okay, great. Any questions, any other questions for Tower before I ask Dan to respond to one of Tower's amendments? Okay, Dan, you're back up.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Stein. And I would say that it would be highly unusual in any producer responsibility program for packaging for the agency of jurisdiction or state to have control over the funds. That is just not the way it's done. And I think if I understood Tyler correctly, one of the primary concerns is the cost of the needs assessment, which is not probably insignificant. And we would be interested in proposing an amendment whereby the PRO, using a third-party entity, would take on the responsibility for completing the needs assessment with oversight by MDE. That is a common approach that other states have been looking at, rather than the state having to be the one to conduct or use a third party to do the needs assessment. The PRO would do it with oversight by the state agency. Therefore, there's no reimbursement for that significant cost that has to go back to the state. that's a cost that the PRO incurs right up front.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, and I'm happy to talk to you about it a little bit more offline. I also want to be clear that we don't want to collect all of the funds. We would like to collect the fee that is established to pay for our programming in the fund. So we don't want all your money. We would just like the fee that we agree upon to run our programs to be deposited into.
Yep, and I think we can find a way to work that through, because those are expenses in the draft language here that the PRO is required to reimburse the state for. So you're saying, listen, in shorthand is give us the money up front, let us put it in the fund for our administrative expenses, if you will. The needs assessment is a hefty expense, so maybe it makes sense for the PRO to take that on. Not to say the other expenses won't be significant for the state, but I hear what you're saying, Tyler.
Thank you. Yeah, and on the reimbursement basis, we would still have to get general funds so that we can then be reimbursed on the tail end. So happy to work this through with you offline. I appreciate your points.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Okay, great. If both of you could talk further offline, that would be super. Okay. Any other questions about the bill or the amendments? This another question I have is, I understand the idea of a producer association, what we refer to as the pros. If there's more than one, they have to coordinate with respect to reimbursement, maybe other things. If a producer, let's say you had a big producer that said, no, I don't want to coordinate this, I don't want to be part of an association, I just want to do my own thing, submit my own plan to MDE. I take it the bill allows that. Is that right?
Yeah, there's language, I think, that's basically that the producer may submit a plan individually or through a producer responsible. My brain just shut down. I can't believe that just mumbled my words like that. Sorry about that. But yeah, there is language that says that you can submit the plan individually or through this organization.
Okay. And Scott said individually or collectively. All right. And then just getting back to the issue was brought up that I wasn't clear on about what local governments are reimbursed for. Are the pros taking over any recycling responsibilities or any other sort of DPW related responsibilities of local governments? Or are the pros just adding as this entity that's going to be establishing fees for members, working, reimbursing local governments to some extent on some products?
There's also language too about infrastructure investment, but not taking services. It's more just like it's reimbursement, for the costs of managing, collecting, transporting those materials. And then there's also language in the bill that relates to investments in the infrastructure that's needed in providing those types of services.
But who does, I guess, who does that? Who does those investments? These are things I guess local governments would normally do. Are pros assuming that responsibility, or can someone help with those questions I've got?
Yeah, so as written, the bill would allow for either direct investments by the pro into infrastructure, presumably things that were identified in the needs assessment, or reimbursements if municipalities do that investing themselves. So either is allowable as written.
Okay, so you're saying that if, let's say, a jurisdiction wants to set up a new MRF, then conceivably it could work things out with the pros for the pro to pay for some portion of that.
Yeah, that's right. Or even the whole thing. So it depends on really it's going to depend on the needs assessment. That's why that study is going to be so important, because things will be identified, like gaps in infrastructure and funding needs will be identified through that process. So it'll have to be justifiable investments, not like random on a whim, we're going to build a MRF over here. You know, there's going to have to be a demonstrated need for that. And then when there is, if a municipality is like, yeah, we did this study, clearly we need a MRF here, it's capturing your stuff, you pay for it, then that discussion will take place. And the pro could either directly invest in that or reimburse, or maybe it's like a combo. I mean, I think options are not super specific in the bill.
Where a jurisdiction could just say, we're going to do, let's say the pro wants to take things in a different direction. The county could say, okay, we're going to go ahead with our own plan and not seek any reimbursement.
Absolutely. Yeah. Nothing stops a municipality from doing whatever they want.
Okay.
Any part of the program.
Okay. It's almost 8 o'clock. Does anyone else have any other questions? I think we'll have to defer HB 595 and 621. The good news is that I guess, Kristen, at least one is a reintroduction from last year, and one is pretty close.
595, there was a Senate bill last year that this committee passed with amendments, and it just didn't make it back to the Senate in time. And so this is very similar to, if not identical to those amendments that the committee adopted last year. And then 621, it says it's a reintro, but there are some differences in this year's bill compared to last year's.
Okay. Hey, does everyone have another 5 minutes so we can sort of knock out these bills, not to approve them, but at least answer any questions that people might have? Any objections? Okay, thank you. All right, so Kristen, sorry to ask you to repeat what you just said about about those bills. 595 is you're saying, is that the one that's very close, if not identical to last year's bill?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is the one that requires MDE to develop a database of supplemental environmental projects that a violator could choose to undertake as part of a settlement or enforcement action. And this committee actually adopted amendments last year that were incorporated into this bill.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions about 595?
I don't. I do have a question of if this is the exact same bill that we put amendments on last year, would anybody object to moving the bill, or?
I think that
Just a question.
Yeah, let's just hold it. I mean, see if there are any questions, and then perhaps at our next meeting we could move it. Yeah, if you don't mind, Delegate.
And just a little, the Senate version has crossed over. We have it.
It has. Okay. So even more reason why we could approve it quickly. But if you don't mind, let's not do that right now.
So this is identical to the Senate version.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And then 621, we had a somewhat similar bill last year. But this has changed.
It has changed. There's still the component where MDE would be required to monitor these discharges from sewage treatment plants and evaluate whether the effluent or any nutrients impact midge populations. But the new part of the bill would require MDE on certain findings to hire an inspector that must stay on site of the affected treatment plant for at least 180 days until conditions of the bill are met. So it's definitely a new requirement.
Right, and that does, I don't have the fiscal note right in front of me, but what I recall was that generates a significant cost, I guess.
Yes.
What's the number of that bill?
That one is 621. Tyler, do you have anything you want to comment on with respect to 621?
Sure.
I'm sorry, Delegate Ruth. I'll call on, I'm sorry, Delegate Ruth, I didn't see your hand. I'm calling you right after Tyler.
Nope,
Okay.
I was going to ask for Tyler.
Okay.
Sure. So yes, it's correct. The bill requires us to have a inspector on site if there is any discharge above effluent limitations for the next 180 days and 24/7. And so we would need to have staff on site around the clock. And that is why we estimate and have in the fiscal note that we will need an additional 474 inspectors, 59 managers, and then another natural resource planner.
Okay. Any questions for Tyler?
Oh,
Yes.
I just wondered if anybody, I don't know if this is for Tyler, but if anybody had talked to the sponsor about amending that part back out. If that's, I don't know, if that's, such a huge fiscal note.
Yeah. Tyler, have you had a communication with the sponsor?
I have not spoken about amendments with the sponsor.
Okay. So if anyone would like to reach out to him, certainly feel
I'll send
free.
them a message.
Okay.
So
All
Tyler,
right. Yeah, I'm sorry, Delegate Gilchrist.
I mean, you read that as somebody needs to be on the site every hour.
Yeah, so they would have to remain on site for the next 180 days is how we read it. And so,
Certainly you can read it that way. That's what I was wondering when I read it.
and it doesn't specify, how large of a violation or if they're in significant non-compliance. So we do have many facilities that do experience some sort of effluent violation for, a variety of reasons, but they don't meet non-compliance and they aren't in continual non-compliance. So it would be a very large undertaking.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, Delegate Boyce, thanks for reaching out to the sponsor and let us know what he says. And with that, I think we're going to adjourn, but we'll be back tomorrow at noon, assuming that floor session doesn't go past noon to review the Conservation Finance Act, HB 653. So, all right. Thank you to everyone for your time and diligence, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.
Okay.